Let me ask you a question. Have you ever got on a meeting with a potential client? The client was a great fit. You knew you could help them, but you just completely botched the call and then you never heard from them again or they didn't buy? Of course, it's probably happened to you. It's happened to me in the past as well. So I've developed a really effective sales process and a sales call framework. And you're going to learn in this video some of how you can structure your sales call, some questions to ask, and how you can run a much more effective meeting. Because in this course, we taught you, how to get leads, how to get more meetings with your ideal clients, but you still have to actually do a good job on those meetings and close the deal. So you're going to learn some really valuable, really juicy tips on how to be more effective at the actual sales call. So this is, again, to be used once you actually have a meeting with a potential client and you're sitting down for that discovery or that strategy meeting. These tips will help you take more of those meetings and turn them into actually signed clients. So one thing that I really recommend is actually having kind of a structure for your call. If you've been winging your sales calls, then you definitely don't want to be doing that. I know that obviously you can close deals sometimes especially if you're very charismatic and very personable, but still the amount of deals that you'll close and the amount of success that you'll have on these calls will go way up if you actually have more of a structure. So you shouldn't be winging every single call. Now, you don't need to have a script. We're definitely not a big fan of scripts here because I think if you have a complete script for a sales call, then it's like, the person can kind of tell you're going through a script and it sounds very robotic. So I don't recommend having a script, but what I recommend you create is a framework for your sales call. And a framework is kind of in between like having a script and having nothing at all, where you have some kind of guidelines for the call, but you're not, super scripted and you're still allowed to have like a natural, genuine conversation because that's what sales is really all about. What I recommend is you have a framework where you have, the categories, kind of like the bullet points that you want to go through in a call, and maybe some of the actual questions scripted out, but not going too much into detail. So definitely you want to create a framework for your sales call that you basically go through every time. Now, every conversation might be different. You might ask some questions to other clients that you don't ask to others, but you should always have kind of the general flow and the general bones of that call be pretty much the same. Now, how I'd recommend you do this is do all of your discovery and asking questions in the beginning. And the second half should be actually where you're presenting your offer and closing the deal. One of the biggest mistakes I see with a lot of clients of ours is, they jump on a sales call and in the first few minutes, the person on the other end is like, hey, so tell me more. How does your service work? Like, how does it work? What's the price? And then they just go right into pitch mode. Here's how it works. Here's what we do. Here's what the price is. And when you do that, you're going to lose a lot of people because ultimately, you should be really, first of all, only offering your service to someone if you actually know they're a good fit. That's why you want to do your discovery, which is asking questions first. And second of all, if you spend time telling people about your product or service and what it costs, a lot of times they might tell you it's too expensive because they haven't really, seen the value in it. So when you're doing discovery in the beginning and you're taking the time to ask them questions first before going into pitching your solution, you can really find out like what are their needs, what are their pain points, what are their biggest challenges that brought you to the call. And if you can bring all of that out and even bring some emotion out of them, then they're going to be like really in that state of mind where they're like, man, I didn't know I had all these issues and I need to solve them. And then they're going to be in a much better state for you to actually present your offer to because they'll be way more receptive to it. Whereas if you just go into your pitch right away, there's no like context to it, right? So ultimately, in sales, you shouldn't be trying to sell everything to everybody. You should always be presenting your solution as a tailored thing to their needs. Even if you only sell something that's pretty, standardized and it's the same for every client, you should always at least present it in a way where it's like, hey, this is just for you. So the whole vibe of sales calls that you want to be going for is really being that doctor that we talked about, right? Being that professional that's just sitting there, spending most of the time asking questions and learning about their situation. And then if it turns out they're a good fit, it's pretty simple. It's more of a smooth transition, just going, hey, based on what you've told me and your answers to my questions, I can definitely tell that what we do would be a good fit. Would you like me to explain it to you? And that's just a much more natural, non-salesy way of going into the offer. And then when you're presenting your offer, you can actually present it in a way where you're just talking about how you're solving their problems. So the thing is, if you just go into presenting your offer right away in the beginning of a meeting, you're just going to be saying it in a very generic way. But if you spend a lot of time doing discovery and asking questions, you can learn like what they care about the most, what their biggest pain points are, and only focus on those things. Because again, people buy a product or service for different reasons, right? You probably have had some clients in the past and they've used your product or service to solve different things. So you want to find out what's really important to them and then just talk about those things. Have you ever sat through, a sales pitch that was just like really boring? Like someone was, making some presentation to you and 90% of it just went like in one ear out the other? It's because of this, right? So you don't want to give that experience to your prospects. And when you spend some time to really do the discovery and ask questions, you can find out all they care about and what they're trying to solve, and then just talk about those things. And you won't give them that experience where they're like, I can't wait for this meeting to be over, right? So that's some of the reasons why we want to do discovery first. So again, honestly, most of your sales calls should be just you listening. Some of the best salespeople I know and the best entrepreneurs I know that are really great at this, they don't talk much at all in their sales calls. It's pretty counterintuitive. You would think that, your job is to go talk about your process and the features and the benefits, but really it should be very little of that and mostly asking questions. Because again, you're there to help that person and learn about their situation and only present your offer if you can see that it's a good fit for them. So ultimately, I would say like 70% of your call should be the other person talking and you just listening. And I truly believe that the sale is actually made before you present your offer. If you do the discovery right and you really find out about their problems and their goals and why they're here, they're going to be like pretty much ready to work with you and they're going to really see you as that expert. And by the time you go to present your offer, it's already a done deal. So the discovery is really actually the most important part of the sales process. You might have been told that it's all about having the perfect pitch or the perfect presentation, but it's really not. It's really about, connecting well with that person earlier in the process. So again, to structure your sales calls, it should be discovery and asking them questions for really like the majority of it. And then only then, transitioning to showing your offer and then leaving a few minutes after your offer to actually discuss it with them and possibly, deal with any concerns. So that last part is key. What a big mistake I see is a lot of people, they present their offer and then the client says, okay, great. Well, I'm not sure, but I'll think about it and get back to you. And then the call ends right there. Instead of just doing that, why not take some time to actually ask them like what's going on or what concerns do they have or do they have any questions? That way you can get feedback from them about your offer. Because a lot of times, if you present your offer and then you ask your client or you ask the prospect a few follow-up questions, you'll be surprised what they'll tell you. They'll tell you like maybe some huge concern they have. And if you didn't know about that, you definitely could have lost the deal and maybe never heard from them again. But if you know about that concern, then you can talk it through them or maybe share some examples or stories of past clients that also had that concern or whatever it is, but at least you can handle it, right? You can't handle any concerns or objections if you don't know what they are in the first place. So again, the general structure is discovery, present your offer, which should be really quick, maybe 5, 10, like 15 minutes max, and then leave a little bit of time to kind of talk with them and get feedback about your offer. You don't need to pressure someone into making a decision, but at least try to find out like where they're at before they leave that call so that you know if they have any concerns and if you can help or send them any more information that might help them make their decision. Now, when it comes to actually doing the discovery, there's a few different areas you can ask questions about, and it's also very important you do it in this order. So here's what we recommend for our sales call playbook is first ask questions about their situation, meaning like just kind of find some facts about where they are now. Let's imagine that I was selling marketing services and I was doing a sales call for that. Of course, I'd spend maybe the first 2-3 minutes chit-chatting and then kind of get to the questions. And a situation question would be kind of learning like what they do now. So I might ask them like what their business is. I might ask them what marketing they do already, if they're doing any at all, and also how it's working. So before you go into, asking any really deep questions, just try to get a general sense for where the person is at. And it's also an easy way to warm up the conversation. So step 1 would be situation. Step 2 would be digging into the problems. Remember, the problems is the most important part of the sales conversation because that's what makes someone want to buy something. Is they want to solve a problem, right? So after learning about their situation, ask them about some of the problems they're having. And you can even ask them straight up like, hey, what challenges are you facing with your marketing that made you want to meet with me today? And a lot of times you can just ask an open-ended question about their challenges and they might ramble on for like 10 minutes and you just let them talk, don't interrupt them, maybe ask some follow-up questions to go deeper. But ultimately, you're just trying to let them talk about their issues as much as possible so you can really figure out, what's important to them and why they're here. But this is really, really important. A good reminder for this is before you go to presenting your offer in the sales call, ask yourself like, do I know what problem this person has? Next time you're about to go present your offer to a potential client, stop and check with yourself like, do I know what problem this person is trying to solve? Do I know what challenges brought them here? Because if you don't know that, you need to find that out because that's the reason that somebody's going to buy. You need to be able to present your offer as a solution to their problem. Because again, that's what you're selling. You're selling a solution to their problem. You're not selling a service or a product. And the more that you can get that in your head, the more that you're going to have way more effective sales conversations. First, we talk about their situation, ask them a few quick questions to understand where they're at now. Then we ask them about the problems that they're having. And then we ask them about their goals, that future state, like what do they want? So if I'm going to be selling marketing services as an example, I might ask them questions about their marketing goals, like how many followers do they want to have? Or how many customers per month do they want to have? Or, what are some of their even bigger picture goals? Like, what is their vision for their business? Or what do they want to, how much revenue do they want to get to? Now, if you can talk about that with your prospect and get them really, really excited about that, they're going to be visualizing like what a perfect future could be like if only they had their problem solved. And can't you see how having the prospect talk about that is going to put them in a much better and more receptive state to actually buying your solution? And this is what I meant before about giving some context to your offer, because if you just go right into presenting your offer in the first 5 minutes, they don't have any value attached to it, right? It's just, oh, another thing, and they might say it's too expensive. But if this person just spilled out like all the problems they're having, if they just spent a few minutes really talking about their goals and their vision, and they're going to be super excited about what life could be like, they're going to be in a much more receptive state to actually, purchase your offer. And the price might not seem as high because now they're not just thinking about the price, they're thinking about the price associated with how much better their business could be if they solve those challenges. So that's why the sequence of all this stuff matters a lot in sales. So again, first ask about the situation, then ask about their problems, then ask about their goals and what kind of solution they might be looking for. And only once you went through all three of those, then transition into your offer. And again, leave some time after so you can have an open discussion with them about your offer and see what they think, see what feedback they have, and see if they have any objections. I'm telling you, if all you did was just change like the structure to your sales calls and you made sure to ask questions about those three things, you would close way more deals. So what I would recommend after this video is go actually take out a Google Doc or a piece of paper, whatever your style is, and go write your own sales call playbook. Just think about like, okay, what are the questions I need to ask about their situation? What are some questions I can ask to have them, explain some problems or challenges to me? What are some questions I can ask about, their goals or their desired future state? And then, also try to script out like how you're presenting your offer, because if you just kind of wing that every time, then that's not going to be very effective. But try to have, more of a framework for that too. So go out and, just write this down on a document, spend some time really working on it, and just practice it, rehearse it with a friend a few times or a coworker, and then go try it on some real sales calls. The last tip I'll give you as a bonus is about handling objections. So, when you do sales calls, you probably hear a lot of time from potential clients like things like, oh, I want to think about it, or I want to sleep on it, or I want to talk to my spouse, or I want to talk to my business partner, or it's too expensive. How many times have you heard that, right? It's too expensive, or I can't afford it. So a lot of what you've been taught about handling objections isn't really actually very true. A lot of times we read these things in sales books from like 30 years ago when selling was totally different. And a lot of people in sales will tell you to, handle that objection right away and come up with a really good argument. And that's also kind of our instinct, right? If a prospect throws an objection our way, like one of their concerns, our natural response is to kind of like prove them wrong and like argue against it. Like, no, it's not too expensive. It's valuable because of X, Y, and Z. But let me ask you a question. How do you think that would make the prospect feel? How do you feel when you actually express, your feeling or your opinion, and someone just instantly says like, nope, that's wrong because here's why? Even if they're actually right, do you feel good? Do you feel connected to that person? Probably not, right? Because ultimately we want to have our feelings, validated and acknowledged rather than, someone just trying to argue against us, because it could easily become like a very combative environment where it's almost like you and this person, not so much arguing, but just going against each other. And it should never feel like that. It should always feel like, you and the potential client are kind of on the same team, just trying to solve the problem together. So next time you get an objection, instead of just going instantly to being defensive or to trying to argue against it logically, instead just try to understand it and empathize with that person. So if somebody says, hey, it's actually pretty expensive, first try to, acknowledge and empathize with it, right? Like you could say, yeah, it's definitely not cheap. I understand it's a good bit of money, but could you tell me more why you feel that way? Like, what is it too expensive compared to? So then what you want to do is ask a question to get more information. So the mindset with objections is always this. First, acknowledge and empathize with them, because again, what they're really doing is they're expressing a feeling. So just first, relate to them and acknowledge, their concern, because even if it's wrong, like their feeling is still valid, right? That's their feeling. And then you want to ask a question to get more information. Because what a lot of people do is they hear an objection from a prospect, but they don't really know what's going on beneath the surface, and they just go instantly into handling it. So what you want to do is you want to try to go deeper and try to really understand like, where is this concern coming from? And then only once you know the real true issue, then you can actually talk about it and handle it and maybe, help that person overcome that concern. So let me give you an example with the too expensive objection. Somebody says, hey, this is too expensive. I'd say, yeah, I understand it is a big investment. It's totally reasonable. But can I ask why you think it's too expensive? They might say a lot of different things. They might say, it's too expensive because we don't have the budget for it. Or they might say, it's too expensive because we're paying another company now and they're charging half. Do you see how, someone's saying like, oh, this is too expensive because we have a company now that's charging me half as much? That's a totally different scenario than someone just saying it's too expensive. And if you know that they have a company now that's charging half as much, you can ask questions like, well, what is that company doing? Maybe you find out that this company they're using now isn't even offering half the stuff you're offering, and now you're in a way better spot to talk about that. But again, if you just kind of rush to like handling the objection and arguing it against it, you don't really know what the real issue is. So next time you get a concern from a prospect as far as why they might not want to do business with you, just try to have the mindset of gathering more information. Just try to find out what the real concern is. And once you find out the real concern, you can have kind of a relaxed conversation about it, and then maybe talk about how they could overcome it, or share some examples of past clients. And this works with anything. If somebody says, hey, I want to think about it, that's not really an objection because you don't know what they want to think about, A lot of prospects aren't going to tell you very honestly off the bat what they don't like about your product or service because, you're a salesperson. They expect you to, come back at them with like an argument or to defend it, right? So a lot of people just try to avoid like that confrontation that they maybe have had with a past salesperson. So again, because of that, a lot of prospects are just going to give you a very surface level answer. So your job is to just try to get beneath the surface and just really be there to help, really be there to understand what their true concern is so you can help them overcome it. So when somebody says, I want to think about it, you should respond with something like, yeah, that's no worries. It's totally fine if you want to think this over. I do understand it's a big decision. But can I ask which part of this you want to think about more? Is there anything unclear? And see how, first there I acknowledged their concern. I said, yeah, it's totally fine to think about this. That kind of takes some of the pressure out of the situation. And then I'm asking, well, what do you want to think about? And they might say, I want to think about the price. Or I just want to think about it because, we're considering hiring someone in-house instead. So see, now you can get to the real concern and actually help them overcome that issue. So that's some of the best tips I can give you for handling objections. Again, it's really a 3-step framework, right? First, you acknowledge and relate to them. Then you ask a question to get more information and really clarify that. And then from there, you're going to actually discuss it with them. So you're acknowledging it, you're clarifying what the objection is, and then you're going to discuss it with them to help them hopefully get over it. All right, so that's some insight into our sales call playbook. I hope that helps you on your next few sales calls, and best of luck.